I have some stuff I want to do before I jump in, and I also want to talk about what I'm going to do when I jump in so that it's not a complete surprise. So one of the things I want to do, I have a lot of trouble with, which is it's self-promotion. So I'm going to pass these around. These are just bookmarks. It's advertising my novel, and I brought a copy of my novel. So I have a novel, and it's The Blood Throne of Caria. And the reason I'm pushing it, and it makes me feel dirty doing this, so I'm probably just off a little bit, is because I'm ramping up to try and put out another novel, and if I can get a little bump in sales before that happens, it helps me. So if you like that kind of stuff, get my novel. That kind of stuff is historical fiction. I'm particularly obsessed with basically everything from Iran to Italy. That's like my zone where I obsess about. This is set in the 5th century BC. In the southwest corner of Turkey. And it's about a real person, so it's historical fiction, but she doesn't have, her name is Artemisia, she doesn't have a lot of, how should we say this? There's a lot of attacks done on her by historians, and so my goal in writing this novel was to figure out what was true and what was a lie, and then correct the lie. But I can't claim it's the truth because it's speculation on my part, so hence historical fiction. Somebody is going to ask at some point what they should read. This is a fun way to start. It's The Crusades Through Arab Eyes. Wouldn't that be a novel idea? By Amin Maalouf. It's an old book. It's 1985, if I remember correctly. But there. Now, I've done that part. I also want to dedicate this talk to a group of people. So it's a small list, but I just want to do this. Omar, Saeed, Iman, and then Hadi. I'm probably forgetting somebody else I intended. I actually have I was just gifted a piece of rock from Palestine, from the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and so I'm probably going to hold on to it the entire talk because, well, my talk is going to take place in Palestine mostly, so this is kind of a strange thing to have right now. Also, let's see, what did I do with it? I probably already lost it. I brought show and tell, but it won't work because the camera is too small and you're sitting too far away. I actually brought coins from the time period, so I will, after the talk, you can come up and look at it, and then what I'll do is we'll put for the people who are watching this on video, I'll just put pictures up on it. But just to give you an idea what I have, this is a coin from William II. It's after the period I'm talking about today because I'm not going to get to him. William II was the king of Sicily. The year in my head is 1153, but who knows? Anyway, the reason I brought it was because I am going to talk about the Normans and I'm going to talk about Sicily a little bit for background purposes, and I kind of wanted to stick this in your head a little bit. On one side, the coin is written in Latin. On the other side, it's written in Arabic because the Normans took Sicily from the Arabs, and so they just made it so that they were a bilingual society. Let me see, hold on, I'll do this one here. This coin is going to matter because this is Romanos IV, the Roman emperor. I'm going to talk about him in a little bit of detail, just briefly, because he's going to set things in motion that make the rest of the story possible. And then when you look at the coin, you'll see that the quality of the coin dramatically falls when you get to Alexios Komnenos. Alexios Komnenos becomes the Roman emperor just like 11 years later, and the quality of the coin is terrible compared to this one, so it makes you realize how far into decline the Romans had fallen. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of background, and in the process of doing the background talk, I'm going to bring up the birth of the Arab Empire. We don't know what year this coin was minted because it doesn't have a year on it. It's actually a counterfeit coin. The Arabs, when they made their empire, needed coins. And they went and stole a Roman mint, and they began minting coins, Roman coins. So it has Latin letters on the back. It has three Roman emperor, well, an emperor and his two sons on the front. They're holding in one hand a cross, and in the other hand a globus cruciger with the cross sticking out of it. So there's literally 6 crosses on this coin. And this is the Arab Empire, one of the Arab Empire's first ever coins. It was minted during the Rashidun period. We don't know a date, so I can't tell you who, but most likely it would have been Uthman ibn Affan or the Khalifa Ali ibn Abi Talib. It's probably not one of the earlier two. And then this coin is Muawiyah the First. He did the same thing. It's a Roman emperor with 2 crosses in his hand, and on the back Latin letters. And one of the reasons why I wanted to sink that into your heads is to also show how the boundary between things is really blurry, right? We're a society of people who want to put everything into categories, including ourselves. We can't wait to label ourselves, and then we keep breaking it down further and further, and the reality is these categories are all imaginary and made up. Nobody's that easy to categorize, you know what I mean? Let alone whole societies, especially societies where everything is blurred together. I probably have said Arabic words, for example, that are English in this. I wasn't paying attention, but at one point I might say the word nadir or zenith or zero. And then by contrast, Arabic is filled with Latin words. For example, the word fulus, the word for money, comes from folus. It literally was, one of those coins was a folus that I was holding up. And so the word is actually Latin. It's not Arabic. It's just the Arabs use the Latin word. Crez, the word for cherries, comes from cerasinus, which is the Latin word for cherry. And it can go on, because everything's stuck together. All right, so as Eric Deggans would say, I'm going to do a bunch of table setting. Eric Deggans is a TV critic that I listen to on NPR, and he recently complained about too much table setting, but I don't know how to not do table setting. And the reason I have to do the table setting is if I just jump into the Crusades and start talking about it, it'll be entertaining because there's a lot of violence. It's like if you enjoy people massacred, and I know you do because I watch the same movies you do, then this is a great story because it is gory. But it's kind of helpful to know why it happened and how did we even get into the situation where it was possible. So I can't skip that. Having said that, I have no intention and no belief that I can, even if I wanted to, cover the entire Crusades. So in other words, this is part 1. So just setting this up now. I will try to do the entire Crusades, but I'm betting I'm going to have to do 4 parts. One of the reasons I don't know is some of you have figured this out about me. I don't write my lectures out, so I actually don't know what I'm going to say until it starts happening. And so as a result, I don't know how the timing of this is going to land, so it'll be fun. I'm exploring this with you, and we'll see where it goes. It'll probably be a train wreck, and people will hate it. But it'll be fun for me anyway, and that's the important thing. All right, so to do this, I need to introduce some actors. The first actor I want to introduce is probably the most important actor in the story, and it's the Arabs. And the reason they're the most important, obviously, is because the Crusaders are going to invade the Arab world to fulfill their goal of making a kingdom of Jerusalem. So the Arabs created an empire that most people don't talk about, that's basically been deleted from history. It's the Arab Empire, although I have frequently heard it referred to as the Muslim Empire. The reason you need to not do that and call it the Arab Empire is the Arab Empire was created by Arabs, like the Roman Empire was created by Romans. We don't call it the pagan empire, and when it becomes Christian, we don't call it the Christian empire, right? And the Japanese, we don't call them the Shinto Buddhist empire. You know what I mean? When Alexander the Great made his empire, we don't call it the pagan empire. So why would we do this in this one particular case? And what I'm going to pose to you is the reason we usually don't even name it, and if we do, we sometimes call it the Muslim Empire, is because of anti-Arab hate. We have that running through the core of our society, the core of our civilization. And one of the reasons is because of the events that led to the Crusades and the Crusades themselves. In other words, by doing anti-Arab hate, you're perpetuating this old wound. It's time to let it go. Although, by the time we're done tonight, you'll be like, oh my God, what's that about? So it'll be good. The Arabs began making their empire, and by empire I mean it in the true sense of the word empire. So, to be clear, a state that rules multiple countries and nations. That's all you need to be an empire. Having said that, you could claim then that the United Kingdom today, what's left of the great empire, is still an empire, because Great Britain is Wales, England, and Scotland. That's 3 countries. And then throw in Northern Ireland, Gibraltar, Bermuda, and the Falkland Islands, the Malvinas, and you end up with multiple countries, right? Or at least pieces of multiple countries. So they began making their empire in 633 when the first Khalifa, Abu Bakr, launches his armies into the Persian and Roman empires simultaneously in what should have been a completely insane, impossible, can't be done event. And it's not only done, but by 711, the Arab Empire became the largest empire on the planet to that date. There have been larger empires since, but there had never been a larger empire before this. It stretched by 711 from Spain to Pakistan. It went all the way into Central Asia. So if you can conjure a map of the Roman Empire, it owned about 60% of the Roman Empire. Conjure a map of the Persian Empire, it owned 100% of the Persian Empire, and it went into Central Asia and it went into India. Right? For those of you, because I just said Pakistan, for those of you who don't know, the British cruelly and sadistically cut Pakistan out of India. Pakistan is India. It's just, you know how the Brits are. It's divide and conquer, wreck, destroy, ruin. India is named after the Indus River, which is 100% in Pakistan. It's just cruel. You know what I mean? Anyway, so, this Arab empire, by the way, when it was born, it had a tiny Muslim population. But by 711, it had a few more Muslims. It was maybe 5-10% of the population was Muslim. The empire itself was majority Christian, 60% Christian. In fact, probably somewhere around 60% of the world's entire Christian population was in the Arab Empire. Isn't that hard to comprehend? The majority of the world's Christians lived in the Arab Empire, an empire that was majority Christian. In 711. So the empire has been around that, right? From 633 to 711, it's already been around for a few decades. It's not like it was just born. One of the reasons why Muslims are such a small percentage of the population is they didn't convert by the sword. There was no compulsion to become Muslim. And at first, what the Muslim conquerors did was they said, if you're Christian or Jewish, you worship the book, therefore you have a pathway to heaven, so you have to be treated like a full human. But then as they kept conquering, they kept running into other religions, and they just kept extending it. So the Zoroastrians, okay, yeah, why not? And right, centuries later, by the time they're in India proper, they're like, yeah, Hindus too, it's all good, we're gonna make this work. Right, that was what kept happening. By the way, the Arab Empire in 711 was probably about 5-10% Buddhist, just to mess with you. Afghanistan had a giant Buddhist population. So it seems counterintuitive, but there it is. That empire gets into a conversation with itself. And the conversation it has with itself stems from a problem that they had. The Arabs had never ruled themselves, let alone ruled an empire, right? Until this moment. 633, the year they launched the empire, is the year the Arabs, for the first time in history, ruled the entire Arabian Peninsula. So they don't even catch their breath. They conquer the Arabian Peninsula, put it under a single state, and then they just go. They just keep going. Next thing you know, they've conquered the Persian Empire, and they've conquered the majority of the Roman Empire, and they're in France, trying to conquer France. It was the Battle of tour 732 is in my head. I hope that's not wrong. So this empire has a problem. Arabs don't know how to run an empire. They've never run an empire before. Normally conquerors are arrogant and they're cruel and they're sadistic, like take the Romans. So I'm part Italian. So for those of you that don't like being mean to Italians, yeah, a little bit, but it's okay. Gaius Julius Caesar, the guy you incorrectly called Julius Caesar, when he conquered Gaul, there were 3 million people living in Gaul. When he left, there was 1 million people living in Gaul. He murdered 1 million, he enslaved 1 million, and then he looked at the remaining million and went, welcome to the Republic. By the way, we'd like for you to worship our gods. Let's have your taxes now. Oh, and we're going to steal your technology. That's what conquerors often did, right? The Arabs, on the other hand, were humble about this, and they told the Romans and the Persians they had conquered, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know how to do this. We want to just leave you where you are. You're a bureaucrat, you're running this province, don't stop. And then we'll watch you, maybe we'll figure it out, but in a few generations, hopefully we'll have this sorted out. In the meantime, I'm going to counterfeit this money over here. It's got crosses on it, but that's okay, I'm okay with that, I like Jesus. And that was kind of their conversation. So, the reason that matters is Muawiyah, I showed you the coin. Muawiyah the first moves the capital after a civil war that lasts 5 years, that ends in 661. He moves the capital to Damascus from Medina. When he puts the capital in Damascus, he puts it in a former Roman city. And that matters because it meant that the bureaucrats around Muawiyah are shaping the policies he's creating, and it orients the Arabs and the Arab Empire west. It orients them towards the Romans. And in fact, he's going to lay siege to Constantinople. He won't capture it. But then a subsequent Arab, the next century, is going to do it again, and they'll fail a second time. Had they captured Constantinople on either of those two, they would have taken out the Romans too, because they had already conquered the Persians. Yazdegerd III was the last Persian emperor. He's gone. The Persians are done. But the Romans are still hanging on. For the record, what saved the Romans was the emperor put out a contest. And he said, anybody who can invent something that can save us, I will give you a sum of money. A Syrian refugee, isn't that cool? Isn't that weird, a refugee did it? I thought we were supposed to put them in cages. Anyway, a Syrian refugee invented a flamethrower. So what happened was the Roman Navy had a chain blocking the vulnerable north end of Constantinople. They had a chain that went across, so the Arab Navy couldn't get through it. And the Roman Navy was hiding behind the chain, this big chain. And the Romans pulled up the chain, and the Roman Navy started coming out, and the Arabs are like, why are they coming? We'll just sink them. This is suicide. And the Romans came right up on them, and the Arabs had no idea they had flamethrowers, and they just opened up and set the Arab fleet on fire. And that's how they saved Constantinople. Anyway, that's why you should never turn away Syrian refugees. That is the rule on that one. Or is the rule you should make them. Oh, sorry, I went to a dark place. All right, so, in 750, there's a coup d'etat. The Abbasids overthrow the Umayyads, and they move the capital to a brand new city that they've just built on a village. The village is called Baghdad. It's a Persian village, and they move the capital to this city, and they rename it Medinat al-Salam, the city of peace, and they build this amazing fortress system. It's 2-layer fortress system. It's incredible. The city should be impossible to capture. And science and commerce and philosophy pour into the city, art pours into the city, and the city grows really fast and becomes a major city really quickly. But it's in Iraq, which was Persian, not necessarily ethnically, by the way. There was a huge Arab population in Syria during Roman period and a huge Arab population in Iraq already. What I mean is it was the Persian Empire, but there were also a lot of Persians as well because they were intermingled. Because you got to remember, this is a pre-nationalistic society. It's before people went, oh, my DNA is better than DNA by virtue of my race, right, or by virtue of my nation. Back then it was, I was born in this city and that makes me better than you. It was city discrimination, which is fun. We have that a little bit, like whenever a Houstonian walks up to you, you know you frown. Anyway, so this means that the conversation changes because now it's got a Persian orientation because the Abbasids are surrounded by Persian bureaucrats. And those Persian bureaucrats have two agendas. One, to shift the attention of the Arab Empire east, and two, to destroy it. That is their goal. They are going to break this thing. And the reason is because most of the countries that the Arabs conquered adapted and began to speak Arabic, or at least there was a large population slowly starting to speak Arabic. Like Arabic probably didn't become the major language in Egypt until about 900 AD, but there was already a population of people speaking Arabic for commercial purposes and for political purposes by this point. The Persians weren't learning Arabic. They were holding on to their identity and their language. They had converted to Islam, but they weren't going to convert to being Arab. So right, ethnically, Egyptians aren't actually Arab, but culturally and linguistically, they're 100% Arab. I keep running into conversations with people like, well, Egyptians aren't real Arabs. Oh, do they still speak ancient Egyptian? I missed that. I mean, they do. If you go to a Coptic church and listen to the liturgy, they do it in Coptic. Coptic is ancient Egyptian. Ancient Egyptian is as alive in Egypt as Latin is in Italy. You can hear it. It's not dead, it's just mostly dead, right? And so what it means to be Arab is really more of a linguistic thing than it is an ethnic thing. It's not a DNA thing, it's do you speak Arabic? Well, the Persians rejected that. They refused, they resisted. And so little by little, they start to pick at the Arab Empire from within, because they're the bureaucrats running it now. And pieces of the Arab Empire start to come off. If I remember correctly, the first piece comes off in 756. It's Spain. One of the Umayyads escaped the Abbasids. They massacred the Umayyads. They tried to kill all of them so there would be no rivals out there causing them problems. Well, one of them got away. He snuck through Egypt. He went across North Africa, he went to Spain, and in 756, 6 years after the Abbasid revolt, he pulls Spain out of the empire. And so the empire is already starting to come apart in 756. I think 727 is the next time a major piece comes out, and that's over in Persia. And little by little, the Arab Empire starts to disintegrate. Eventually, it will lose all of North Africa and Persia, and as it's shrinking, the Khalifa, the system where you had a person who was a religious and a political authority, is starting to become symbolic, and they're being replaced by wazirs. They're being replaced by ministers. And so there's actually now a secular leader who's running the show, and the Khalifa is becoming a symbolic leader who's mostly just confined to a palace in Baghdad and has no meaningful role other than to walk around the garden looking pretty. And by the time that happens, it also means that the person who has the best position symbolically to unify people has no political power, which is bad if you're trying to hold things together. I can't give you an exact date when the Arab Empire stops functioning, but it's pretty finished by 900. I've seen the year 833 used as well. I think you can have an argument about when that's happened. By the time the Buyids are running Baghdad, it's over, right? There's no two ways about it. The Buyids were Persians who had broken out Iraq and a huge chunk of Iran and were ruling it on their own. Then, of course, the reason that matters now is if there's going to be a European invasion down the road, there isn't an empire to stop it. Well, there will be, because I'm going to have to introduce another actor, and it's the Seljuks. In 1037, a group of Turkish warriors begin to conquer the Middle East, and they create an empire to replace the Arab Empire. And that empire is the Seljuk Empire. So for the record, Turks are from Central Asia. They are in the same cultural linguistic group as Mongolians, Koreans, and the Japanese. I'm gonna let you sit on that one for a moment. Take that in. Japanese, Koreans, Mongolians, and Turks are the same cultural linguistic group. Do this as an exercise. Find a Turk and stand them next to a Korean and have the Korean start speaking Korean and have the Turk start speaking Turkish. It is crazy cool. It is very, very super cool. You should totally do this experiment. You can. They exist here in Austin. Just start looking for them. The Turks are starting to move into the Middle East for multiple reasons. One of them being they're serving as mercenaries. Another one is they're just looking for land to inhabit. It's a migration. There are immigrants coming in, and by 1037, they're politically in a position where they start conquering. And they end up conquering a huge chunk of the Asian part that the Arab Empire had. I'm making this number up because I never measured it, but they probably ended up with about 30% of the Arab Empire, maybe a little bit more, maybe a third of the Arab Empire. Let me introduce another actor, the Roman Empire. So, I've said this before in lectures, so people who have seen my previous lectures will probably be annoyed with me because I'm just repeating myself, but I have to a little bit because I'm going to assume that you haven't, and that way it makes sense. When I was a kid, when I was an adult, I was taught that the Roman Empire fell on September 4, 476 AD. This is one of my big pet peeves about the way we teach history. The Roman Empire did not fall on September 4, 476 AD. That's just a lie. There's nothing even remotely truthful about it. What happened on September 4 is Romulus Augustus, the Western Roman Emperor, took off his purple robes, stuck it in a box with a note attached to the box that said, "We don't need two emperors anymore, we just need one emperor," and he sent it to Emperor Zeno. Emperor Romulus Augustus was in Ravenna, Italy. That was the capital of the Western Roman Empire at that time. They had long since abandoned Rome. The city of Rome existed, it was largely empty though. Had 1.5 million people at its height, and at that point there were 40,000 people. Can you imagine walking through the streets of a city that at one point had 1.5 million people, and there's only 40,000 people there? Now, talk about ghost town. What was that like? And of course, most of those houses and buildings have collapsed and they're in ruins, but still, that must have just been a trip. We were great once, what happened to us? This is terrible. And then you look at the coins they were striking at the time, and you're like, dude, what happened to your artists? They all died too? Find some artists. So, what happened was the Roman Empire fell on May 29, 1453. So when you were a kid, probably this happened, because it happened to me, people would go, we don't know why the Roman Empire fell. Maybe it was the gladiators. They stopped doing the gladiating centuries earlier, so probably not. Maybe it was the orgies and the eating festivals. They also stopped doing some of that too. They still had a little bit of that going, but not as much as they did during the Republic. That was the height of that, you know what I mean? That was the good old days. So that's probably not it. Lead pipes. If lead pipes was a problem, we're in trouble. I don't know if you know this, but we have lead pipes in the United States. All the urban centers have lead pipes, as Flint found out. So probably not the lead pipes either. For the record, what happens is hard water calcifies the inside of the lead pipes, and then the lead is no longer a problem because there's basically a salt layer inside the pipe protecting you from the lead. But then your city council decides they don't have enough money. Why? Because we went through a tax cutting frenzy because somebody went, taxes are evil. They pay for things like water. What do you mean taxes are evil? Roads. Where do you think roads come from? Schools. Schools are also taxes. Hospitals, scientific research, police departments, fire departments. That's not the Libertarian Ferry that delivers that stuff. That's taxes. Unless you're lucky and you had a bunch of oil. like Texas does. Anyway, but it's okay. We keep our electric grid functioning just as well as Egypt does. So that's amazing. It's fun living in a third world country again. You know what I mean? It's very familiar. Like I go to Mexico in the summer, so I have electricity. Also, by the way, it's cooler. Push that through your brain. I still can't get over that. I'm very confused about that. So I've derailed myself. Why did I go down that path? So here's what happened. And if I was taught, we don't know why the Romans collapsed, but we do know why the Romans collapsed. And the reason we know why the Romans collapsed is because I can actually tell you the exact day the Romans collapsed. I don't know what it's telling me. Actually, it's telling me you need to go. The Romans collapsed on May 29, 1453. The reason why the Romans collapsed on May 20, you thought I was kidding. The reason why the Romans collapsed on May 29, 1453, and I can tell you exactly why, is because an Ottoman army captured the last Roman capital, Constantinople. Constantinople was the last piece of Roman real estate. In other words, there's no mystery why the Romans fell apart, the Roman Empire fell apart. It fell apart because it was conquered. And we know the exact moment it was conquered. In other words, there's no reason to have doubt about the date that the Roman Empire fell. Here's what happened. There was a guy named Hieronymus Wolff. About 100 years after the Roman Empire fell, and I want to say 100 years, but that's probably wrong, somewhere around 1550, right? The Roman Empire fell 1453. He decided he was going to rewrite history on purpose and tell a really big lie on purpose. He had two goals. One, he wanted to divorce the Roman Empire from its ignominious defeat at the hands of the Muslims. The Roman Empire was a Christian empire. He was a Christian, he was a German, and he hated the idea that Muslims had conquered the Roman Empire, that the Roman Empire had been defeated by Ottoman Turks.